Come with me. Deep dive and think and ponder.
Sit down in a thinking chair.
Of all the ways that we could possibly use Dehya in the future. What's going on YouTube? Leisure here once again. This time I should give some more Genshin Impact. And today we're going to take a deep dive, take a deep puff of some copium, alright? Because we're going to be talking about Dehya, right? And the different possibilities that's going to be with her in the future, right? Just something a little fun just to think about the different possibilities, things we can do. Nothing's too copium. Let's talk about whatever we can do, alright? Last video I talked about, last video I talked about Hu Tao actually. So if you want to know about my thought or my tips that I have for people doing Hu Tao, because I am a Hu Tao main, of course, go ahead and take a look at that video if you want to see something about that. But we're done to talk about Dehya today. And the video before that Hu Tao video, I talked about the different teams that Dehya can do based on the current characters we have, based on what I think she's going to be relatively decent in, right? But the thing about those teams is that they're not the most optimal teams. They're good teams, but there are better options. But usually when we get a character, there are usually teams that they are the best in, no matter what, you know? If you look at the past characters, right? We had Kokomi, right? Kokomi, people didn't think Kokomi was good upon release, but she did have a couple teams where she was best in. She was best in Taser when she first came out. As soon as Shenhe came, she was the best in Freeze. Yaimiko, people didn't think Yaimiko was that good, but she was still best with Raiden. She was a good replacement for Beto, things like that. So she did have teams where she was best in, right? But when it comes to Dehya, that's not the case. So it makes me think, what is Hoyoverse cooking over there?
Wait, let him cook.
Are they cooking something good? Because you know what? Like, even though I've given into Doom Posting multiple times, I just can't accept the fact that they really are just going to release a character that's just not good in so many situations. So what are they doing, right? Where is this character going to be good, and what future ways can they be made good? I think that in Fontaine, we are going to find the answer to Dehya's true purpose, right? It only makes sense. Dehya's the last Sumeru character that we were waiting for. After that, well, sorry, last 5-star. After that, it's just Kaveh, and then that's it. And usually when we get to this point, that to me means that Fontaine is around the corner. And on the last set of patches, right, on the last set of patches 2.0 and such, Yaimiko kind of came later on, and she was kind of geared towards Sumeru. So what if they're doing the same thing with Dehya? She does have a pretty peculiar feature, right? She does have a pretty peculiar thing, which they added recently. I don't know what they were thinking beforehand, but where she has HP scaling part of her base kit. Now, the HP scaling isn't that great, but what if we had something that could really buff up the HP of the character then in some way, or make use of the HP scaling? Then maybe that might be good. And in Fontaine, we have Hydro units that have shown to really like HP, especially like we have Yelan, Kokomi, Ayato, things like that. They do scale well with HP. And we also have Hu Tao, who is also getting those benefits. But I feel that somebody who has HP scaling and benefits so much from off HP, I think that might come into play later on, right? Now, I do feel in Fontaine, since there's probably going to be a major focus on Hydro units and the element of Hydro, I do believe a lot of HP scaling is going to come into play. Because as of right now, there is no characters that can buff HP except for C4 Yelan. So for most people, there's just no way. If we have a character that can buff HP, then that means they can buff Dehya. So I think that when those characters come, Dehya is going to be a very good defensive unit in those teams because she's going to scale with HP well. She's going to be able to use it, and maybe that might have different advantages when it comes to maybe artifact sets, so on and so forth, where the more HP you get, the better off the character is, where she's going to start looking like the best option in those teams. I do believe that there might be characters in Fontaine that are going to be able to buff HP, make use of HP, kind of like how with Nahida, where she takes the person with the highest EM on the team, and she uses that EM and gives it to the on-field character? What if we have somebody that uses somebody that has high HP? So having somebody with high HP on the team might work out very well. So there's that possibility. Or with Hydro also has a connection to healing, right? Because the Hydro runs before increased healing. A lot of Hydro units do have some type of healing capabilities, or so on and so forth. Barbara, Komi, Xingqiu, so on and so forth. It's kind of accepted to be the healing element, to the point where people think the Harkon's going to be able to heal, right? We don't know if that's going to happen, but that's a high possibility. What if we get some more multifaceted healers in Fontaine? So when I say that, what if there's a healer that doesn't heal too well, but they deal good damage or they do other things that is very useful to the team? But if you do that, you're going to want somebody who heals also regularly on the team, right? Looks like how Xingqiu needs a healer, right? Or they need a shielder. Well, what if you get a character that can mitigate damage so that healer is enough? They might come into play in that point, right? So you have a healer that is very useful to the team, but they don't heal enough to be the healer. But if you have somebody that can mitigate damage and mitigate the amount of damage that your characters take, then now that healer is enough, and now your team can be more. So now you have a pyro applicator and a hydro damage dealer, and you don't need to waste team slots on a healer or a shielder. There's that too. Also too, another thing that I'm curious about too, I don't actually know the answer to this question, but when Dehya mitigates damage, does that also mitigate the damage taken to the shield? I'd assume so. So that would mean that certain shielders might be more useful if they have weaker shields. Then Dehya can also allow the shields to take more damage. So that's a possibility too. So, I want to think about that. But the thing with Dehya is that she does have a burst, right? That does take up some field time, right? So to the point where people think that she might be used as a carry, which I don't think she's going to be used as a carry. I think she's going to be more of a sub DPS that has a lot of field time. I think they're going to release characters in Fontaine that might really want to have minimal field time, maybe have some dual DPSs going on. So if that's the case, because right now, one of the main characters that we do officially know about Fontaine is those two characters, right? That we don't know if they're the twins, right? We don't know if they're going to basically be used at the same time, or we have two characters used at the same time, or if, they're going to be separately, things like that. But maybe they might have some type of, characters that push for dual DPSing, right? Because we have a lot of DPSs, so it does make sense that they would kind of push for that, to have more than one DPS on the team. So maybe they might have things like that where you want dual DPSs. And if that's the case, then that leaves room for Dehya to be able to come on, do her thing, but still leave enough time for the main DPS or the better damage dealer to do their thing while they're helping each other. So that's another thing where Dehya can come in handy, where she can be more useful. Another thing too that's a problem with Dehya, which I hope doesn't really become a thing, but it's a possibility, where they're going to be creating more units that have less synergy with the previous units, right? Like how Dehya cannot, during her burst, doesn't work with Xingqiu or Yelan. Right now, our Hydro units kind of cover all bases. That's one thing I'm very nervous about when it comes to Fontaine. Hydro's good, right? We have a Hydro healer. We don't have a Hydro shielder, but we have a Hydro damage dealer. We have multiple Hydro damage dealers. We have somebody that applies a lot of Hydro. We have somebody that applies a little bit of Hydro. We just have all different bases covered, right? We don't really need other Hydro units, maybe besides a shielder. If we're adding a bunch of Hydro units, what are they going to do? So the thing is, I do think that there's going to be units that are going to either have very unique effects, or they're going to just have less synergy. Like units are going to have less synergy with the previous Hydro units, right? Like Xingqiu or Yelan, where they don't trigger them. I think in those situations, there's going to be new Hydro units that are going to work better with those units, right? So there's going to be another unit that would work even better with Dehya, right? That's going to allow Dehya to vaporize and maybe use her as an actual carry, even though she has that small field time. That I feel is a strong possibility, even though I don't like the idea of new units being less have less energy with previous units, but also it could add in a situation where Dehya becomes much more viable. But another thing, right? They need to come up with different ways where Fontaine is going to be able to be more unique, right? Besides just not being synergistic with previous characters. And another thing that can come from that is reaction changes. Nehya introduced something very, very interesting when she came, right? She was the first character to actually change react. Well, I mean, not the first character. Neil would be the first character, but then Nehya came and did that even more. To the point where Nehya allowed characters transform reactions to crit, and Nilo just changed the bloom reaction altogether, where she just buffed the damage of the reaction and she changed how the reaction operates, right? So it only makes sense because the thing with Hydro is the best element in the game. Like, hands down, Hydro's the best element in the game. Dendro comes really close, but Hydro's even good with Dendro too, so it's the best element. So since Hydro is an element that you go to for almost all reactions, except for Geo, it only makes sense that if we had a unit that can deal with reactions better, then that would be good. And the way that relates to Dehya is the fact that Dehya is constantly applying pyro on the field. That means that a lot of reactions are going to be happening with Dehya being used, and she's going to be supplying some defensive options too. So if we have units that work well with reactions and Dehya's constantly making reactions happen, she's going to be good on those teams. I do think she's going to be useful in those situations. I don't know what kind of reactions, what kind of change they could make to reactions, especially when it comes to the Archon, folklores or whatever, how you pronounce it. The Archon might be able to maybe, let's say, they enhance vaporize, or whenever a vaporize happens, there's some kind of buff or something, you know? That could be very good, that could be very useful. So every time Dehya ticks, some kind of buff happens. That could be a possibility, right? That can be great, you know? And maybe she'll heal too. So vaporizing with Hu Tao might not be good, but vaporizing with Dehya would be, right? So that's a possibility right there. So you never know. The options are limitless when you take the cope and you sniff it up and you breathe it in. The possibilities are limitless, right? So I just kind of want to get some ideas out there. I mean, granted, this is a video, just straight COPIUM video where it's fun to think of the different possibilities, you know? Some of these things might come true. You never know. So it's actually a fun topic to talk about. So if you guys have any other COPIUM that you'd like to add to it, definitely feel free to comment down below and let me know what kind of COPIUM takes you guys have, or where Dehya's gonna be able to go, or maybe not even Dehya related, just what is going to be in Fontaine waiting for us. Maybe I might make another video where I deep dive more into what I think Fontaine's gonna be offering all together, right? And bring this back up. But yeah, and also if you like the content, definitely like the video. And also subscribe to the channel so you can get more content like this right there. Like I was saying before, trying to get to that 1,000 mark. So if you guys can help me with that, that'd be great. But with that, I'll end it there. Legend out.